Welcome to the STARS program, seniors taking active roles in society. And now, here's your host, Anita Finley.
I have someone who is, he's so fascinating. I just lost all time because I was listening to him so much. But it's, of course, we love authors. But Jeffrey David Reynolds, you heard him once before, and he wrote this very, very interesting book called Justice Betrayed. It's a novel, but because Jeffrey has really been in the very world he writes about, it's so true, even though you say it's in a novel. So welcome to our show again,
Thank
Jeffrey,
you, Anita.
really.
It's so nice to be here.
Yeah, it's so nice. But is that true, that the fact that you have been so involved in what you wrote about, it's still a novel, but there's so much truth in it?
Yes. Yes, the stories of the murders, there are several murders in this book. They are taken from the New Mexico court cases that I've been involved in. And they're real, and the defendants are real, the people around them are real. When I was in the courthouse, you get a sense and a feel for the people, the bailiffs, the police officers, the district attorneys, the public defenders, the defense attorneys, and there's always drama in the courthouse. Every courtroom has a different drama going on.
You know, when you think about it, and you and I were just discussing this, that the responsibility of a judge is pretty strong. And you read something from your book. One thing I have to tell everybody, this is so well written. It's mesmerizing, actually. Once you get started reading it, you don't want to put it down because it's like you really are there. Someone murders his wife, or someone's into drugs, or someone else. And there's always, I always say there's two sides to everything. And I know that that's what a judge has to do, to decide which is the side, right, that's real. And then there's probably a third side, too, that nobody even hears about. But you spend a lot of your time trying to help people, and usually I guess it's the woman who isn't getting child support for the children.
Yes, that's right.
Now we may find it reversed because there are women who are very successful, maybe not paying, and they don't have the child, and the husband has to receive the money. Have you heard of that lately?
Yes, there've been several. I had several of those cases when I was a judge. Yes, I did. Not too many. By and large, it's usually the deadbeat dad who doesn't pay his child support. And then the woman would file for AFDC, for aid for dependent children, and become a tax burden. And so the federal government started this program to go after fathers who did not pay their child support so that they would relieve the state of the tax burden. And also they went after them for past due child support. So they would withhold part of their income tax returns from these deadbeat fathers. They really went after them, and they created these judgeships, of which I held one, to go after deadbeat fathers.
Now, how do you go after someone like that?
The state has a bureau called the Child Support Enforcement Bureau, which goes through the welfare rolls and also the divorce decrees. And women file with the Child Support Enforcement Bureau when husbands fail to pay their child support. The Child Support Enforcement Bureau then files in my court. When I was a judge, they filed in my court petitions for back child support. I would hear the cases. I would have to make the determination whether or not they were in contempt of previous court orders, whether they had not paid their child support, and what I was going to do about it. My options were simple. I could jail them until they came up with the money by signing a contempt order. That would, in many cases, it's amazing how someone who says they have no assets in court, when they're put in jail, immediately find the money necessary to pay their past due child support. That money appears, and it appears quickly. So the leverage that the judge has, or that I had when I was a child support judge, that I could put people in jail, made them cough up the money that their wives and children would due. And it's not the wives I'm protecting. It's the children. It's the children that this money is aimed at, and it's their children, and they're neglecting their own children. And
I hope anyone's listening got that message. Now, I wanted to ask you a question. It's not the same as alimony.
no,
So alimony is that they have to go back to court on a different issue, but this is for children.
the only concern I have is child support for children. Alimony is in the divorce court. It's different entirely.
And is a child support, is it usually an age of 18, or is that individual? What is the age?
Usually, statutes say 18. Sometimes the parents agree that they will support the child until they're 20 or 22 to get them through college. If they're middle class people, that's something that they may agree to in their divorce decree.
Well, let me just say, so Jeffrey, I know I want to get into your book, but I'm just going to tell you something. I don't think I've ever said this to anybody on the air, but I'll just share it. My mother and father got divorced in 1950, probably 1950. And they split the assets down the middle. Wasn't a lot, but they split it down. And my father was supposed to pay for my brother and my child support, and he never did. My father decided to become a lawyer. I mean, this is really interesting. And he claimed that he had to pay. He went to the University of Miami, and he had to become a lawyer, and he didn't have any money to pay. And so my mother got, a job, and she worked and took care of us. And she's a very wonderful woman. And so she didn't want to put him in, jail or anything. So then he became a lawyer, and he still didn't pay. My father never paid for anything. But I will tell you this. He did very well over his lifetime. And when he died, he left a very nice estate to my brother and myself and my one son. So we did get the money in the end, but in a different way. I'm just sharing that. I mean, it's so funny when I'm talking with you and I'm saying, and my mother worked very hard. She did wind up getting married again and all, but we didn't have any child support. And so I had a father that was a deadbeat father, I guess, but he made up for it at the end.
Well, today, the primary responsibility of raising the children are upon the parent. And the courts will not allow what happened in your case to happen today. The first responsibility is to support the children. That comes before cable TV, college tuitions, new cars, housing, food. First, the children. That money is taken and allocated for the children out of checks first, and then the living expenses of the father.
That's great. Well, see, everybody, you learned something. Now let's talk about your book, because your book has a lot of murder in it, and a lot of drugs, and a lot of things. And what I'm really impressed with is the way that you write, though. It's very melodic, and it's hard to say melodic when you're dealing with people who have just done some terrible things. And you were reading about this one man, and I think that was pretty interesting. The man that killed his wife.
Yes.
And the way that you wrote that, I mean, we talk, because I guess I brought up to Jeffrey before the show, what about this man that killed all those people in the movie theater, and who they claim now he was insane when he did it? Well, and I asked about that. I said, what do you think about people who are insane? And I said, do you think they really have those moments of insanity? And so you were reading to me something that was, I think, very typical of that. Here someone claims that they love somebody, and then at the very last minute winds up killing them because they went crazy. Or I don't know what they do. Do they go crazy? What happened? Why don't you? And it's why don't you take a few minutes, 5 minutes, and read that little part. And this gives you an idea of what kind of writing that Jeffrey does. So it's called Justice Betrayed, and it's by Jeffrey David Reynolds. And I just want you to know you can get this book by going to Amazon.com or to Sunstone Press. It's a great book for you to read. You will it will take you to some places you've probably never known before. Go ahead. It's really good, Jeffrey. Explain about it. Yeah.
This defendant, his name is Carl Anthony. He is a DEA informant. He is working for the DEA. He's been involved in drugs, And because of his intelligence and his resourcefulness, the DEA recruits him to be an informer. He has broken a major methamphetamine ring. He's been responsible for 300 convictions in New Mexico. But in order to buy drugs, he has to sample them, and he becomes paranoid. He samples cocaine and methamphetamines. He buys $100,000 worth of drugs at a time, and so he becomes addicted, and he's scheduled to go to a DEA detox center with his wife, and this event intervenes. I got home yesterday morning around 11 o'clock after a drug buy. I had some cocaine in my system. You've got to taste the goods, judge the quality before you can make a buy. It's the way it's done out there. So I was a little high and paranoid. Cocaine always makes me paranoid. I've been out all night. I usually get home around 5 or 6 in the morning. Sarah, my wife, was upset. She wanted to know where I'd been all night and morning. I told her I was at a drug buy. The police detective who he's making this confession to says, "Did Sarah know you worked for the DEA? Yes. She wanted to know when I would start living like other people, having a home life and a family, and working daytimes. She wanted all the guns and drugs out of the house. She started yelling at me over and over, 'You need to end this drug career. This is insane. We can't go on like this. You're paranoid all the time. It's dangerous for you, and you've pulled me into it. I want out. Either you end it or I'm leaving. I'm scared all the time. I want a normal life.' And I told her, look what I've bought you. This house, the horses, all the things you've ever wanted. I don't want anything anymore. I want out. I don't want to turn up dead, shot in the head because my husband's a DEA informer." And then she pleaded with me, "Carl, please, we can have a good life. We can get away from here. We can sell the house and start all over again where no one knows us. We can get a fresh start." I knew she was telling the truth. It had been exciting at first, but now it was hell. Sarah was right. "Carl," she said, "you don't even make love to me. You're so tense and strung out all the time. We have no life." She was begging me. And then she started yelling again. I think she surprised even herself. "I want out. Either you get out or I'm getting a divorce." "You're not leaving me. I've worked hard for everything we've had. Get your drugs and guns out of this house or I'm leaving. I'm out." And in my head, over and over again, I could hear Sarah say, I'm leaving, just ricocheting over and over in my head. "You're not leaving me." I never thought she'd leave me. I never thought she'd go through with it. But I could tell by her voice that she meant it. We were in the kitchen. I pulled my pistol from my shoulder holster, pointed at her, squeezed off a round to the left of her head. It hit the cupboard to her left. Then I aimed the gun to the right of her head and squeezed off another round. It hit the cupboard to her right. "You're not leaving me," I said. Instead of scaring her, she became angry. She snarled at me. "You're not man enough. You can't even get it up." I took slow, deliberate aim. Everything seemed to stop around me. I can remember everything, every detail, the glare in her eyes, her defiance, the rise of her chest as she let out a breath, every movement. That moment seemed frozen and more real than anything before, and every second seemed like an hour. I didn't mean to. I didn't want to. I just felt pulled by a magnet. She was yelling at me. I didn't even hear her. It was like watching a silent movie in slow motion. I pulled the gun level with her head, and I just eased a little pressure, just so slight, and Sarah's head exploded. I squeezed twice more before she hit the floor.
It's horrible. I mean, it is. It's so, and the thing I'm thinking about is, I mean, this is a novel, but this really happened in a sense. I mean, this is
This is gleaned from a real murder case of a real DEA informant who did kill his wife.
So now he's he's pleading insanity.
He's pleading insanity.
But I don't think we should tell him what happens. Let them get the book.
Let them get the book.
I don't want to do that. I mean, this is so, you have to decide, is he insane? Would you go with him? Or what do you think the judge did? And what do you think happened? And so this is just one of a lot of scenarios that you've gone through with people. I mean, some really interesting ways that it's like a merry-go-round. It just keeps going and going. And I am so impressed with your writing. I mean, so when you're sitting at your computer, you're deciding how this is going. You're taking it from stories that you've known. But yet someone has to write that. I mean, you're really very talented. Do you have a writing background?
I was an English major at the University of Miami.
Well, that's
I'm
why.
I'm a hurricane.
Yeah, that's right. I know we talked about that. But see, so your writing ability has really come to the forefront, and it's great that that you've done this. And I told him that the quality of the book, it's a paperback, but yet the quality is almost like it's a leather feeling book on the top. I mean, it's beautifully done. Everything you did on this is so good. And so you live here and you do something very interesting. Can we talk about that?
Sure, if you like.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's wonderful.
I work in the infectious diseases division of the Department of Health in the Delray Beach Clinic here in Palm Beach County. And I work with the Haitian community, the Caribbean community, and I help them with their medication management and their social services. So that's what I do. It's my second career, and I have really come to love it.
You know, in your career really spanned, when you first got out of college, tell us how all this went. You actually went to law school,
yes.
University of Miami, where my father went. I told you about that. And then what did you really want to do? What kind of law did you want to practice?
I thought about admiralty law and international law. And my father was a lawyer. My sister is the past president of the Toledo Bar Association in Ohio. My brother's a lawyer in Boca. And my other sister married a lawyer.
Oh, this is great. Okay.
I've come by it genetically.
You have.
So I was around it all my life. And I found myself drawn to judges because I thought they were neutral. I really didn't have a strong feel for being an advocate one way or the other until I got into it. And I took a judicial clerkship in Albuquerque. And that clerkship was with a really excellent judge. And I had the chance to really see the workings of a great legal mind, dissect, analyze, reason, argue, and then render decisions. And I thought, this is really fascinating. This is really what I'd like to do. And so I got more and more involved in the judicial part of law. First, I worked at the Workers' Compensation Administration as what was called a pre-hearing officer in those days, which was my first bite at the judiciary, at having any judicial power, where I could render decisions in workers' comp cases that could be appealed, but of course, my decisions were binding if they weren't appealed. And I would hear cases from workers' compensation, both defense lawyers and plaintiffs' lawyers, arguing cases. And New Mexico had made the statute interesting then. In the old days, the statutes were drafted to favor the workman, and that had changed by the time I became a pre-hearing officer. That became balanced, that the evidence was to be weighed evenly, not in favor with the presumption in favor of the workman. So that made it a lot more interesting, and it helped the defense bar, but it also did away with fraudulent claims. So it was a very good and balanced statute, I thought. And I got to hear a lot of medical testimony, which helped me in this book and other books, and also helps me in my present career. I used to read medical reports and hear doctors' depositions. So there was a lot of medical information that I absorbed doing that job.
Well, so you really have, your career has been quite interesting. So you really liked being a judge. I mean, you seem to have a very fair, very even temper. I mean, you seem just your whole manner and your demeanor. So I guess when you think about it, you didn't really want to be a prosecutor, or you didn't really want to be in the heart of defending people. You
No.
wanted to really be more thinking and listening and then making decisions. And that's what you were able to do, of course. And then helping people, women, as you said, who needed child support, or the children who needed the support. So that's really, it sounds to me like that was your biggest
Yes.
and best part of your legal experience.
Before I started workers' comp, I was a staff attorney at U.S. District Court, in the federal court system, where I worked during the prison riots in New Mexico, where 33 inmates were killed in a prison riot. And I did the civil rights litigation for the federal court judges who took over the state prison and operated it under consent decree, which is they took all the power and took control of the prison, the federal authorities. And so I did that work. And then I worked at the Supreme Court in New Mexico for the first woman Supreme Court justice appointed by the governor in the state of New Mexico, Mary Walters, who'd been a test pilot in World War II. So she was an interesting person and a good lawyer. She was a plaintiff's lawyer in practice, but had been a pretty good and even-handed judge. So I'd been around the judges before I even got any bites at the apple, and then this administrative judgeship came up, and I loved it, and it was a great opportunity.
And we talked about something just before we went on the air about your feeling that it was good that Obama went and now looked into the prison systems and saying, okay, let's get rid of some of these, people who just don't deserve to be there. And it's interesting that it's not even a political football. It looks like even the Republicans, that this is something that people are believing should, and you feel that way, don't you?
Well, when you think of the cost of incarceration, if it costs the government $50,000 or $60,000 a year to incarcerate someone, and they're in there on a marijuana charge,
and are they?
Some of them are. I don't remember. I haven't read all the cases that the president pardoned, but some of them are on very small amounts of drugs. And to put them in for long sentences, one man I think was in for 30 years. 30 years at $60,000 a year. You do the mathematics.
But I'm not even there with the mathematics. I'm there with the human being. It's like it's insanity that this person, because they're not being. What are they going to learn in jail? They could be smart. They could be. Everything could be fine. Wasn't there a time though, in a few administrations ago, where they were really hard on drugs, and this is what was it?
Yes. I remember as a young man, I spent a year and a half in South Carolina, and that people who had even one marijuana cigarette could get a 20-year sentence. Now, that's the kind of thing I think that the president was commuting, those sentences which today would seem disproportionate. And that's the question. Should someone with a marijuana cigarette be serving the same sentence as someone who robs a bank? There seems to be a disproportionate amount of sentencing, and I think the president tried to eliminate that. And he also eliminated the cost, which is a consideration when the taxpayers have to pay for someone who has a marijuana cigarette or a small amount of cocaine. Now, what the court systems have done is they've created these drug courts around the country where people who have drug problems are sentenced to programs or rehabilitation. They're not sentenced to prison, especially if they have no previous criminal record. That's important. No previous criminal record, no violent past, none of that in their background, and they have a drug problem. Then there's the drug courts that have been set up, and these seem to be the wave of the future for the judiciary.
Wow. I love your coming on the radio show. I'm learning so much from you. Just reading newspapers or listening to the press isn't good enough. You're really great.
Well, the other thing that's really been in the judiciary now is with the returning vets. Many of the returning vets have PTSD, and they have been subjected to a lot of violence where they were in Iraq and Afghanistan. They're used to being around violence, and they come home and they're not prepared, and they haven't de-stressed properly, and they come home and they get involved in something like domestic violence, which is punishable by jail time, or they get involved in some minor altercation, and the courts have started to take cognizance of this and are doing things other than sentencing these men who serve the country, who have done more than one tour of duty, which I think is really grossly unfair to the servicemen, to ask them to do four tours of duty in Iraq and Afghanistan, to put their lives on the line repeatedly, over and over again. They need the help to readjust and re-enter the society. And they shouldn't be sentenced to jail with common criminals because they're having a hard time readjusting after living with violence at a very close range and having threat to their own life on a day-to-day basis.
Hey, Jeffrey, I think there's a new position for you. I mean, we're going to have to get you into another judgeship, looking at the vets. Oh, my goodness. Is there someone doing that? I think we're going to have to figure out how we can get you in that position. Well, I know you're writing another book. Is it going to be like this?
I've written one that isn't published yet. It's a coming-of-age book about 5 friends who go to college together. They go to Lafayette College in Pennsylvania, and it's their experience during the late 60s and early 70s with the backdrop of the Vietnam War. And one of the friends, one of these 5 friends in the college, has served in Vietnam, and he's come back, and he's gone back to college. So it's his experience and then the 5 friends, and one of them becomes, he's a prankster. He starts college as a prankster, and he's having just a ball of a time. And then he meets a few people, and he starts to get interested socially in some of the issues of the day. And pretty soon, he becomes a social activist. And the 5 friends are going through college, and each of them has a different political point of view, a different twist on the 60s and 70s. So the book is already written, and I'm just looking for a publisher.
Oh, my goodness. Well, I certainly hope we get a shot at your book, because this has been a wonderful interview. I thank you so much. For those of you who have the July issue, go to page 17. You'll read the review, and please do buy the book. I think you'll enjoy it. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Anita. It's so good to see you again.